When they attack black people after they've been murdered, when they did absolutely nothing wrong, you're pushing us to the limit. And what do I mean by that? You're asking us to talk about history, the history of the South. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? There were savages in Georgia. It was the ancestors of the white right-wingers. They were absolute savages. They murdered people, they lynched people, they raped people, they enslaved people. They took babies from their mothers and sold them as property. You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. So don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murdered him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them, to them, not by them. For God's sake, you want to do racist stereotypes? If it fit anywhere, and it doesn't, but if it fit anywhere, it would certainly fit white right-wingers of the South, who has hundreds of years of history of being savages. Savages! They snatched babies, and they sold them as property, and they raped their mothers. Savages! That's what they were. You want to talk about stereotypes? Screw all of you who still defend that Confederacy. That monstrosity. Anyone who defends that is a barbaric savage.
That's why they don't want to teach American history in public schools. That's why there's been a strong orchestrated effort to prevent the teaching of anything that you just mentioned right now. Because, hey, God forbid that, children learn about the real savages in this country's history.
Europeans come to this continent, literally ethnically cleanse the indigenous population out of existence, kill them on a scale that has hardly been equaled, and refer to them as savages. That's an achievement. Who's the savage? The first time I encountered this was in a little town in Massachusetts called Deerfield. It's a reconstruction of what that little town looked like in colonial America. And in front of each house is a plaque that explains something about this house. And then description. On the 18th of October of 1702, the savages attacked. The first time I saw this, the savages. You come in here, destroy everything these people have, and they are the savages. That's an interesting move.
It is.
I
hadn't thought of that before.
Think about it.
But I would like to say what scares us is I think we hear violence.
The young lady said she's afraid of violence. And isn't it sad that we who have been the victims of so much violence, now whites fear violence from us? We do not have a history of killing white people. White people have a history of killing us. See? And what you fear, may I say this, sir? What you fear, and it's a deep guilt thing, that white folks suffer. You are afraid that if we ever come to power, we will do to you and your fathers what you and your people have done to us. And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind, and that is not necessarily the mind of black.
Buddy, Professor Moore here. So last week in my modern history course, we covered indigenous people. And one of the topics that we discussed was the demonization of Native Americans and the Declaration of Independence. In the 1776 Declaration, Thomas Jefferson calls Native Americans merciless Indian savages. And he argues that what makes them savages was that their rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So there's 2 points to be made here. Number one, yes, indigenous people did kill American settlers. However, these were violent acts of resistance against a genocidal settler colonialism. The second point is that, in my mind, this is a clear-cut case of psychological projection, because what Jefferson was accusing the Native Americans of doing was exactly what Europeans and Americans were doing to indigenous people. Genocidal violence against indigenous people is something that started in 1492 with Christopher Columbus. However, in the decade before the American Revolution, it reached a new and horrifying dimension. After the British defeated the French in the French and Indian War in 1763, the British king made a deal with the Native American tribes they had been warring against. And the deal was that no more American colonists would take over their land. So in 1763, he issued the Royal Proclamation, which drew the proclamation line across the Appalachian Mountains. And if you see that map right there, you can see the British colonies on the East Coast there. And then right next to it is supposed to be independent Native American territory. So this is the deal that the British king made in 1763, that no more American colonists would cross over that proclamation line and take over any more indigenous land. However, the American colonists did not listen to the king. They basically said, screw you, we're going to continue to do what we've been doing and take over more indigenous territory. And that's exactly what they did. And it's interesting that in most American schools, we're taught that one of the first big grievances that the American revolutionists had against the British Empire was taxation without representation. It's all about the Stamp Acts and the Boston Tea Party. But in reality, one of the first cases of American colonists disobeying the British king and rebelling was going against the 1763 proclamation line. When the king drew that line and said, do not cross it and take more Native American land, the American colonists disobeyed. In fact, a decade after the proclamation was issued, over 50,000 settlers had crossed over that line and were taking over Native American territory. When American colonists crossed over the proclamation line, the explicit goal was to take over indigenous land, and in order to do that, they had to exterminate the people that were already living on that land. And one of the ways that they went about doing this was forming these local militias or these vigilante groups, which were really nothing more than death squads or murder squads that were going out and committing horrific acts of violence against the Native Americans. There was a strong incentive for people to go out and to murder indigenous people. In 1763, one of these vigilante groups, these death squads in Philadelphia, were offering cash for evidence of dead Native Americans. And the evidence that they were requesting was the scalps of these individuals. And here are the cash rewards that they would offer to these individuals. They would pay you $134 for the scalp of an adult man, $130 for the scalp of an adult woman, and $50 for the scalp of a child. And it wasn't just these vigilante squads that were offering cash rewards for the scalps of Native Americans. In 1755, the governor of the town of Spencer, Massachusetts, offered cash rewards for Indian scalps. He gave out 50 pounds for the scalp of an adult man, and he issued 12 pounds for every scalp of such female Indian or male Indian under the age of 12 years old. So also offering cash rewards for the killing of women and children. And remember back to the Declaration of Independence when Thomas Jefferson said what made Native Americans savage was that they killed regardless of age or sex. But we can see in these examples that the governors of towns and cities and states were offering cash reward for the killing of women and children. And just to give you an example of kind of how widespread and ingrained this practice was of murdering indigenous people, it's pretty shocking, but it took all the way until 2021 for Colorado to officially remove the law off of their law books that offered cash rewards for bringing in the scalps of indigenous men, women, and children. So you can see here in this photo from the Washington Post, the governor signing this and officially removing this law. But just imagine, even though it wasn't in use, it remained on the law book. This case of a state offering their citizens cash rewards for the killing of men, women, and children. The violence that American settlers unleashed on Native Americans only continued to grow worse and sometimes culminated in massacres that are almost completely lost to memory and history today. For example, in 1782 in Pennsylvania, one of these vigilante death squads murdered 96 members of the Delaware tribe, 96 Native American men, women, and children. And these individuals had actually recently converted to Christianity in a bid to save their lives, thinking that if they were fellow Christians, then they wouldn't be murdered. However, these vigilante members accused them of attacking white settlers, and so they brought 96 people, 2 at a time, behind a shed, and they brutally beat them to death over the head with a hammer. So this is the type of violence that happened. And this is just one single episode that I'm flagging up over hundreds. So this is the type of violence that American settlers were using against indigenous people. This type of genocidal violence against indigenous people is something that remains consistent throughout the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s. In fact, in the year 1900, celebrated children's book author L. Frank Baum released The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I actually really loved this original book when I was a kid. However, I was shocked to hear L. Frank Baum's opinion about indigenous peoples. Here is what the children's book author said about Native Americans. He said, "The whites, by law of conquest, by justice of civilization, are masters of the American continent, and the best safety of the frontier settlements will be secured by the total annihilation of the few remaining Indians. Why not annihilation? Their glory has fled, their spirit broken, their manhood effaced. Better that they die than live, the miserable wretches that they are." This type of genocidal rhetoric and this language of total annihilation, total extermination, can be found everywhere you look. It was U.S. Army General Philip Sheridan who coined the famous phrase, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt said, "I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are dead Indians, but I believe that 9 out of every 10 are." The Civil War General William T. Sherman is rightly praised for his role in defeating the Confederacy during the Civil War. However, when it came to America's war against its indigenous people, here's the views that he expressed. "We must act with vindictive earnestness against the Sioux, even to their extermination, men, women, and children. During an assault, the soldiers cannot pause to distinguish between male and female, or even to discriminate as to age." And that's exactly what happened. In 1861, U.S. Army Captain Nicholas Hote described how during one battle, the Navajos, squaws, and children ran in all directions and were shot and bayoneted. "I saw a soldier murdering 2 little children and a woman. I yelled immediately to the soldier to stop. He looked up, but did not obey my order. I ran up as quick as I could, but could not get there soon enough to prevent him from killing the 2 innocent children and wounding severely the squaw." So think back to the Declaration of Independence and Jefferson calling Native Americans savages because of their undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. We can clearly see that this is what the Europeans and the Americans were doing against indigenous people, and it should be called by its true name, genocide.
White culture is formed in savagery. I also said there isn't a place on God's green earth that they haven't come there and decimated the native inhabitants. There isn't a place. They are murderous savages. That's their culture. They call it conquest. We call it savagery. This is broad history. This is the history of white cultures. When they have the intention to invent a weapon, they don't just invent a weapon that can harm an enemy in one-to-one combat. No. They invent bombs that can decimate entire populations. They invent viruses like smallpox that they spread amongst unvaccinated Native Americans and then decimate their populations. And therefore the Americas, have got a native population which is less than the settler population in certain countries like Argentina. I mean, even a country like Brazil, yes, obviously there are still some native inhabitants there, but their population is less than those who were brought in from Africa as slaves, as well as those who came in as European settlers in the colonial times. So the culture of white people throughout white history, even to this very date, is that of savagery. It's that of inhumane behavior that is normalized to the point where they feel like they're entitled to behave like that.
The only reason that white people in the United States or anywhere we are, in Europe, in Africa, in Australia, in Israel, wherever we are the colonizers. We are the colonizers. And we live off the expense of the assault, Europe's assault on Africa, the kidnapping of African human beings, the trafficking, all of these things that we hear today. This is where it came from. Hundreds of years of assaulting and stealing everything that African people and Africa as a continent had and putting it into the hands of white people. And so this is why, as the chairman has said, the true class struggle, the true working class in the world is the African and colonized working class, not white people, because all white people, and you know this is true. You and I know this is true by just living our lives and seeing it. All white people sit on the pedestal on the backs of African and indigenous people. And, the statistics are that even poor white people have an easier ability in a crisis to raise $3,000 in an emergency than middle-class African people do. Because we live in social wealth.
White supremacists be like, we was conquerors and slave owners and shit. No, your ancestors were illiterate cousin fucking farmers. And the people who you claim to be descended from were also cousin fucking savages that reaped havoc across the world for economic gain. And most pathetically of all, here you are in the 21st century espousing the beliefs of racial hierarchy. You're a modern working class person under the delusions of fraudulent 18th century science. That is genuinely so fucking pathetic.
White people, now all of a sudden you don't condone violence. Really? Where was this energy in 1973 when Marlon Brando allowed an indigenous woman to have his platform at the Oscars and accept an award on his behalf so she could have the opportunity to speak against the film industry for its disparaging way it depicted indigenous people, to boos and hisses from the audience? John Wayne happened to be in the wings, and it took 6 different security guards to hold him back because he was going to beat her up on stage. Then Clint Eastwood got up on there and says, let's dedicate the next award to all the cowboys killed on film. Where was all this energy in 2007 when Tommy Lee and Kid Rock got into blows over Pamela Anderson? Where was all this energy in 2021 when Machine Gun Kelly and Conor McGregor got into fight at the VMAs? Where was all this energy for all the white men who've received awards despite their toxic masculinity and their hideous treatment of women and children, including but not limited to Kenneth Branagh, Woody Allen, Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and Roman Polanski? What's race got to do with it?
White people. If crime statistics really mattered to us, we would be talking about white men every damn day. We as white people love to throw around statistics when it comes to the black community. We love to misconstrue data about poverty rates, crime rates, single-parent households. Here's the thing. If you really want to talk about problematic behavior in terms of statistics, we need to talk about white men. Most mass shootings in America? White men. School shootings? White men. Intimate partner violence, typically known as domestic violence? White men. Police brutality and systemic violence? White men. Online harassment and extremism, white men. Domestic terrorism, white men. Serial killers, white men. The demographic making up the vast majority of CEOs, judges, senators, and police chiefs who refuse to hold white men responsible, white men. And yet us white men are really talked about as being a problem. Few white people are asking what's wrong with white men, what's wrong with the culture. Few white men are demanding that we be fixed. And why? Because we as white men humanize and individualize white violent offenders. And it's time to flip the script. To shame and blame, because I know white males are incredibly fragile when it comes to that, but instead to name what's really going on and who continues to be protected and not held accountable because of selective storytelling.
I'm not sure who needs to hear this, but saying that Black people were better off under slavery and Jim Crow because they committed less crimes is not a political opinion. Saying that Black women don't have equal cognitive functioning to white people, and if they are in high up positions, that must mean that they took a white person's slot, is not a political opinion. Believing that Black men who die because of police violence deserved it is not a political opinion. Saying that you don't believe 1 in 5 women are actually essayed, so then 1 in 5 women must be lying, is not a political opinion. That is white supremacy and misogyny.
Let's talk about this story out of South Africa because it says everything about hypocrisy and white supremacy. A white farm owner and his workers are on trial for allegedly murdering 2 Black women who were unarmed, women who were simply collecting old dairy products. And after they allegedly murdered them, they fed their bodies to pigs. Think about that for a second. They fed their bodies, human beings, to animals. The part that pisses me off the most with this is these are the same kind of people who look at Black folks in Africa or America or anywhere else and call us savages. But tell me this, what is more savage than shooting 2 hungry women and then treating their bodies like trash? What's more barbaric than covering it up by feeding their bodies to animals? This isn't just a crime. This is a reflection of a long, ugly history. If you remember, colonizers stole land, they massacred villages, and they called it civilization. Slave masters whipped, raped, and lynched Black bodies, and then had church the next morning. Apartheid made people strangers on their own land. And then when we resisted, they called us violent. See the pattern? Whenever Black people act out of survival, we're branded as criminals. When white supremacists murder in cold blood, it's protecting property. It's isolated. It's lost in the news cycle somehow. And then you got politicians like Trump who push this lie of a so-called genocide against white farmers while ignoring the everyday violence against Black South Africans. That's not just hypocrisy. That's propaganda trying to flip the script and make the oppressor the victim. You want to know the truth? Black people are not savages. What's in our blood is resilience, creativity, and survival against all odds. But what's in their history, their very foundation of white supremacy, is violence, exploitation, and the dehumanization of others. That's the real savagery. So the next time someone dares to point the finger at us, remind them, we didn't invent this cycle of brutality. They did. And we've been surviving it, exposing it, and rising above it for centuries. Now let me ask you this. When are we going to let them stop defining the narrative and start forcing the world to see the truth for what it is?
White people have been the most dangerous, people on the planet historically. I said this boogeyman-like stigma that black people are to be feared. Ooh, the boogeyman black man. When historically, white people have been the most dangerous people on the planet, historically, in terms of murder, mayhem.
So guys, the audacity of a white man calling a black man a savage, you know, and this is not the first time that we are addressing this. The white people have been used to doing this, and they have done it over the ages. Maybe it's something they speak of casually at home. Maybe it is something they have said for a very long time, just not in the faces of black people. But now they're even having the courage of doing that on national television, and that is equally sad as it is wrong. So you have seen that journalist being questioned, made to feel accountable for whatever he has said, and I am happy because this man goes ahead to ask him a question that he is unable to answer. And that is not just about the guy that called black people savages. It also goes to the people that are on their keyboards, on their phones and computers, always leaving ugly comments about black people, racist comments all over the place, simply because they are behind the keyboard and they think that nobody can find them. This is the information that I have for you, and you have watched it in the video. If you've gotten to this point, you must have watched it and you have gathered something, that you do not just come from nowhere and accuse people of something they have not done. Black people do not have a history of savagery. In any case, if there are people that have a history of that, it is the white people. And it's not just saying for the sake of retaliating, it is saying it because it is the truth, and you have been given receipts. You have seen all the things that your ancestors have done over the ages. You have seen them killing children, you have seen them killing women, you have seen them killing men and everyone that is human. You have seen them going to people's lands and forcing them out, forcibly taking the land of the people that are original and calling them names. And even someone having the guts and the confidence and the audacity to say that a good Indian is the one that is dead. Do you know how deep that is? Do you know what kind of heart you have to have for you to say that thing confidently and outright in people's faces, and have the nerve to repeat it when they ask you? Those are your ancestors. You have had the history of our ancestors, the black people's ancestors. What makes you think that they were savages? Why would you call them that? Simply because their color of the skin does not impress you, does not qualify you to call them savages. A savage is someone that has done the things that your people have done. And that is history. That is your history. Maybe the next time you celebrate your history, remember that. Remember that your people have always done that. They're the bad people. That is actually the reason why you do not like to see black people in the black community at large celebrating their Black History Month. You do not like that because it is a constant reminder for you that your people were nothing close to what the ancestors of the black people were. The ancestors of the black people were good people. That's why they were even taken advantage of. They were kind. They listened. Yeah. And they did not have a history of anyone taking advantage of them. That's why they did not know that your people would do that. If you're talking about, for example, when your white men came to Africa, to colonize Africa, it was the same case. They came and they found a people that are united, a people that are calm, peaceful, kind, and kind. Yeah? They were welcomed because our people do not have a history of thinking strangers are bad people. They think a stranger is someone that is in need. And the only responsibility you have as a human being is to help another stranger be okay. That's exactly what they did. And your people, what did they do in return? Took advantage of them and made them pay for it until now, up until now. Same thing that happened to the slavery situation. They were taken advantage of because they did not know that you should, like, you should not allow someone to treat you like that. And you did it anyways. That is the history that you have. That is the kind of past that you have. So anytime that you're tempted to call a black person names, just remember that your people were those kind of people. And if we are to define you by your past, then that is who you are. And you keep showing people that you don't even change, you don't learn. And this is not all black, all white people. I'm talking about the few that know themselves. They're here, they're watching this video. They know themselves. They leave comments here. Those ones are the ones I'm talking to. That's your history. We are not shocked to see you behave the way that you're behaving. Your ancestors did worse. It's in your DNA. It is who you are. It's what you're made of. So if you leave a nasty comment and you don't see anyone reacting to it, just know that we are not shocked. We are used to that, and we know that is not coming from right here. It is from way, way in the past. And yeah, so we have all watched and we have seen the history of white people. That is the kind of people that they were. Anytime they tell you about whiteness, anytime they tell you about white being the color of peace and black being the color of evil, just remember that. They were very peaceful, as you have seen in the video. Killing, murdering, raping, doing all nasty things that you cannot even think of. You cannot even allow your brain and mind to think straight about. They did those things. And they have never apologized for that. They do not seem like they even felt anything about it. They are okay. They have been for a very long time. They think that it's just okay, that is them fighting for themselves. At what cost? At what cost? All that to gain people's land. All that for control. And then what? It is sad, but it is what it is. So, again, this is me coming to you again and saying, if you are here as a white person or someone from any other race, and you're wondering about these conversations and you would like to understand a bit more about them, and you want to at least be acquainted with information of this kind, to know where you stand in these matters, I have a few materials that I would like to help you with, so that you can go ahead and read, and with that, it will help you to come a bit closer. I'm not of the idea that you can actually feel the experience of black people and what they have gone through and what they keep going through every day. I do not think that we are in any position to say that we understand, but it will help you to draw closer and try to make of what they mean when they say this and that. Yeah, when they complain, you will know that it's coming from a place of this and whatever happened to them and their everyday life. Yeah, so the books that I have here: The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, Black Skin, White Masks, Franz Fanon, Major and Miley, Joy Ann Reid, I Am Not Your Negro by James Baldwin, and many other books. Also, if you are a fan of reading narratives and stories, and prose fiction, you might check out Toni Morrison's book, the bluest eyes and many of the other ones. Richard Wright, you might check. Frederick Douglass, maybe his best book would be the biography. You can also check out Ralph Ellison, Maya Angelou, beautiful, beautiful woman, and many more. So people in the comment section are going to give you more materials that you can check out. You can maybe watch some videos. You can watch these kind of videos. Go to my channel. There's lots and lots of videos on this issue of race, and just get acquainted, get information. I want that after a period of time, we're all talking from a point of knowledge, we're all talking from a point of information, so that you are not going to be leaving sick comments in the comments below. You're going to not be ignorant. You're going to know what to say, you know. Sound like someone that is learned. So yeah, if you wish, you can go read those and then give us your feedback, and then we will love to listen to what you have to say from that. So guys, if you have not subscribed to my channel, kindly consider subscribing to my channel to help it grow and reach as many people as possible. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for always choosing to be here with me. And I hope that you're also keeping safe. You are taking care of your brothers and sisters, and just making sure that you're okay, and resting and hydrating, and making sure that you are exercising as well. As we watch everything unfold, make sure that you're in good shape, because you might need that. So guys, I will see you on my next video. So bye for now.